Good afternoon. Delighted to be here, and delighted to be talking to Alexander, who is one of the great hopes of saving journalism, no?
No pressure.
No, none. Yeah. Blendle has done very, very well in here. You've recently launched in the US, what now, about 2 months ago?
2 months, yes.
Talk about the contrast. Talk about what you've learned. Well, first, do you need to describe Blendle? Does everybody know what Blendle is? Do a pitch.
I'll explain very shortly. So basically, when we started the company, I remember that on an average Saturday, my Facebook timeline would be filled with pictures of people taking photos of print newspapers because that was the only way they could actually share articles.
Right.
And I was a journalist at the time, writing articles for such a newspaper, and I found it very annoying that I needed to take pictures of an article to share it. So my co-founder thought the same thing, and we thought, what if we would license all the content from all the major publishers in Holland and put everything in one system? And maybe by not making it necessary to get a subscription, and maybe also by giving me a few suggestions of what then I should be reading and stuff like that. So we approached the publishers with this, and they all told us no. And then we asked them again, and then they all told us no again. And at some point we made a prototype. And that's the moment that one big publisher, NRC Handelsblad in Holland, said, all right, this is cool, we like this.
Publishers are very literal-minded, they have to see it, right?
But this is a great tip for anyone doing a startup.
Yes.
I mean, if your plan is something that's only available in an idea on print, people will not understand it.
Right.
The moment they see screenshots, as ugly as it may be, people will, they need to visualize it before they can get on board with an idea. At least that's in my experience so far. So one got on board, another one got on board, and then we were able to launch about 3 years ago. Long story short, we launched in Germany in September of last year. The New York Times and Axel Springer funded our expansion. Love the Germans and the Americans. And then we launched in the United States in closed beta about 2 months ago, and just today we launched our apps in the United States. Yes, that's good. So you can download them on. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, bravo.
The guys worked really hard on them, and they're on Product Hunt. So if you want to upvote, I won't stop you.
So, Blendle enables a user to come in and buy just one article with a fund that they have there, and not needing to have a subscription, but they have the ability to go across all these publications you have.
Yes.
In
one system. And what's really important, I think, in these times, if you're a young person today. Like, if you were a young person living about 50 years ago, it would be totally normal if you were 30 to have a subscription to a newspaper. Right. It would be the most normal thing in the world. You would kind of identify yourself with that newspaper, and you would wear that membership proudly. But now, if you ask a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old what's the subscription to the newspaper they have, they don't really have that, and they don't really seem to grasp why they should get one. While at the same time, the journalism being done by great journalists in the Netherlands or wherever, it's important. It's important that that stays alive. The research journalism, the big stories that explain what's going on in the world, the journalists that can take a longer amount of time to figure out how something really works or make sure they, expose something that's not doing so well. We need that kind of journalism to survive. And the question is, how will that happen if young people don't have a subscription anymore? And if I can just ask, how many people in this room have an ad blocker installed on their computer?
Be honest. So you're stealing from the mouths of journalists, every one of you. Don't you feel guilty?
Hold on. So I'd say this is about half. Would that be a fair reasoning? About half. So how many of you have a subscription to a newspaper? Wow. That's more than average, actually. You're a good crowd. Journalism, I mean, if these groups overlap, that's fine.
Let me ask one more. How many have a subscription to a magazine? About the same.
This is okay, actually. Yeah. This is okay. You're probably all journalists, and you get them for free, exactly. Or I don't know. But the thing is, the younger the crowds get, the more hands go into the air when you add the ad blocker question.
Hell, it's true. But listen, I started a magazine. I love magazines. I used to buy magazines by the pound. I don't buy magazines anymore.
Yes.
Same way.
So this is the thing. And if it's harder to make money with them, because ads are the basic model to make money with journalism, at the same time people don't pay for that stuff anymore, there's a problem. And I think a lot of the problem was the same in the music industry about 5 or 10 years ago. If you would ask me, hey, would you ever pay for a song? I would be like, no, I've never bought a piece of music in my life, right? I didn't buy CDs when I was young because I just downloaded them on Napster and so I didn't listen to music. In the end, when iTunes came around and Spotify came around, all of a sudden, all of my friends are now paying for journalism. And it's interesting, like, why are we doing that? Why are we paying for music right now? Because we could get every song for free on YouTube, and still I'm forking over 10 euros every month to Spotify.
Right.
Why is that? Why do we suddenly, for something that was so unaccepted that you pay for music, as it was the case about 10 years ago, why all of a sudden do we massively do it right now?
Because somebody made it easy?
I guess that's it. Made it easier, made it easy to find the songs that you like, have your friends all in there, have a social graph, have a recommendation algorithm, have a true experience. And in journalism, if you compare it with, I don't know what to compare it. Like, maybe you're supposed to find the best articles on Twitter in between the streams, or maybe you're supposed to find it on Facebook in between all of the other stuff. I think something is lacking, and it's hard.
Or, of course, part of the appeal of Blendle is, or you find a link to that Economist article, but you don't have a subscription to the Economist because it piles up like guilt.
Exactly.
And you don't use it, so now you make that possible.
Yes.
All right, so a few questions about the current world. First, U.S. market and European markets are very, very different. What are you learning, even in 2-month beta, and with major brands like New York Times supporting you?
Yeah.
What are you learning about the differences so far?
So I guess the biggest difference is that in the United States the problem is actually much bigger in the sense that there is much more content available. Some of it is free, a lot of it is free, a lot of it is paid for. But it's really hard to find the 8 or 10 best articles written by really great journalists, very often working at these powerful institutions. Where do you find the 8 or 10 best articles of today? You used to be able to pick up a newspaper and you would find them in there, and now it's just in this sea of information. Where do you still get them? And I guess that problem is even bigger in the United States than it is in Holland, because here we have
more.
There's just more. Here we have there's 7 or 8 big national newspapers. Well, actually less. A lot of regional newspapers.
Well, don't forget, in the U.S., we didn't have national newspapers until the satellite allowed the transmission of plates
Exactly.
to printing plants in the 70s.
Exactly.
So we had local monopolies, which all turned into crap. But that's where we are. So only now do we have national brands.
Yeah, and there's always, because the English language is so much bigger, you have more niches. So there's much more content being made in specific niches where people use. And here, generic news is much bigger. So I'd say this is a really big difference between Europe on a whole and the United States on a whole. And this also, made it to some extent easier for publishers in Europe to continue making money, because here people used to have subscriptions. Hell, still, there's tons of people in Holland who pay 300 euros every year to get a subscription to a newspaper, and they don't complain. This is going down, obviously, and the publishers are moving up with digital initiatives, but it's not like in the United States where everyone is basically dependent on ads.
I'm actually going to argue with you for a second, because I think we're supposed to do that.
Please do.
Where you say there's too much in America, I actually think, not that we want to make this about America just because an American's up here, but it's interesting to me, the comparisons. I actually think we have less. The wealth of Europe is that you have, in each country, you have strong, divergent national voices in media, respected voices, that have led, I think, for more choice. Whereas in the U.S., you pretty much had the New York Times, USA Today, if that counts, the Wall Street Journal, if that counts, and that's it. So I would actually argue that, in a sense, you have more here to choose from.
More national.
So what's the behavior of the publishers like in difference? So after you went through the 3 times here in your homeland, and you signed them on.
That took a while.
Yeah, and you went to Germany and signed them on.
Yes.
What are you finding with publishers in the U.S.?
They're much more eager to experiment in the United States, yes.
Oh,
yes.
That's good for you.
Yeah, that makes me very happy. Now, I'd say they're very patient. Because I'm not selling that we've saved journalism now with our small, 80-person company from Utrecht. We haven't saved journalism, but I'd say, who is doing it right now? Who is trying to really make an effort to save quality journalism? If you need, yes. Well, thank you very much. We're not there yet.
The sound of one hand clapping for journalism, yes.
Yes. So Facebook is a big player. Twitter and Apple and Snapchat and all of them are really big players who can help publishers with distribution.
Yep.
But they're not really helping them, I think, safe journalism. What they are optimizing for in their algorithm is clicks, is page views. They're optimizing for how you as a user spend as long time per day in their app. And there is an incentive for quicker, clickbaity, quick video, quick snacking stuff in your timeline instead of the long New Yorker story. And then the question becomes, how do you pay for quality journalism if all the tech companies incentivize the quick click?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I'd blame the tech companies. What I would blame is the ad model, the business model that goes for reach and volume. Which I'm going to talk about on the main stage later this afternoon, not to plug that. But the idea of the mass of just reach and volume is where the clicks lead, and that leads inevitably to crap.
Yes.
That's not really Facebook's fault, I don't think.
Why?
Because it's the publishers who write those clickbaity headlines.
That's true. Yeah, they're feeding the
this
algorithm.
will change your life, and you will click, damn it,
Yes.
and come to this, and I can get all of that traffic, and it doesn't really lead to engagement or value.
Yes.
So, but you're part of, the paradox here is you're part of the distributed content world, right? Long before, a fair amount of time before Facebook enabled instant articles and said, you know, come here, come to the light, children, put your content here, you said, put all your content on a third party. You're not enabling, tell me if I'm wrong in here.
No, this is true. It was
You're not enabling me to go and just buy one article. You're not a micropayments thing in that sense. You are a sampling environment across multiple brands.
Yes.
Right?
Well, we actually do both. So we started experimenting on the side of a Dutch big newspaper, the Volkskrant, to enable users to go through the paywall on their own website, but just doing a little button where you can go through. We're actually making tools.
So you are working on that?
Yes.
Good. I'm glad for that.
Yes.
So when you see that article somebody linked to,
yes,
you could now pay for it rather than doing the trick.
Exactly.
Good.
But I kind of disagree with you on the fact that there's no blame for Facebook here, because Facebook is not. You know, they're not helping publishers to make money from their users by getting money from users. You know, apps, you pay Apple, and Apple distributes the money to the maker of the apps. That's a very clear transaction that you do there. And as a user, you can choose the free app or the paid-for app, and very often the free one has the ads and lesser functions, and then the paid-for version is actually better.
Are you against advertising?
I'm not against advertising because I think it's great for news. No one's going to pay for the news, I think. But I am for, I think there's a fair amount of people that if you ask, hey, so we want to do this piece of research in a company that is very controversial and we want to get the truth out or whatever, we want to have a journalist work for it for longer than the 8 minutes that you can spend on your clickbait titles. Are you willing to pay for that? I think a lot of people would actually be fine supporting such a thing. But I don't think the tech companies are inherently interested in that. I think they're inherently interested in selling more ads, and that is a problem.
That's their model.
That's their model, but if they feel some sort of responsibility for journalism, and they say that they do. Google says they do, Facebook says they do, Apple says they do, but in the end they're ad companies. And I think
but they're now
essence,
finally sharing that ad revenue. Instant Articles has
that's
ads
great.
in it. AMP
but it's still
comes
ads.
with the business model.
And
still ads.
Still ads. And I'm not against ads for the news, but I do think that ads have a different incentive. The kind of articles that you write are different if you're on a complete ad model than on a subscription model. And I think in the end, the tech companies do play a role there. And that the incentives of us as consumers, living in a democracy and wanting good journalism, and with the publishers on our side, basically, and the tech companies being in between us and the content, play a big role in here. And I feel like they need to take responsibility. And I don't think they do that enough by just selling ads.
Yeah, they'll
be angry with me, but that's
no.
what I think.
I think Google AMP knows that they have to deal with paywalls and provide that. Google Search is starting to talk about that. Facebook knows they've got to deal with it. So paywalls isn't exactly what you're talking about, but trying to respect paywalls and enable consumers to A, go to content through them, and B, if you're a subscriber to Volkskrant and you come to an article in Google Search or Facebook, because those services know you're a subscriber, they should probably prioritize that content.
I agree.
So there are things they can do, absolutely. I don't think the door is closed.
But they're not doing anything.
They're not doing that yet.
No.
I want to go back to this distributed content thing for one more second, though. Because part of the argument that I hear against putting your content on Facebook Instant Articles is you've lost the consumer. They're going someplace else. Well, if I read the article on Blendle, I'm not in the experience of the publisher.
Right.
So what is that dialogue like with the publishers? What are their concerns and how do you allay that?
What I think is that someone is really truly a customer of yours if they take a subscription to something. And a subscription can be really cheap. It doesn't have to cost $30 a month, but there needs to be some form of recurring payment as a user for that publication. And we need to figure out, right now as a user, you have the choice, do you want to subscribe to the New York Times or to the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times?
And they're all expensive.
And they're all very expensive, and then you buy unlimited access to one pillar. And I think if Spotify has learned us anything, then it's that people don't want to pay for these separate silos. They want some sort of an all-you-can-read solution. At the other hand, I understand why the Financial Times or the New York Times doesn't want to give everything away for $10. But I think there's a lot of room in the middle for regular users who don't particularly are extremely excited about one newspaper so much that they want to fork over $15 a month to them. But they are willing to pay for really great stuff. There is some room in the middle there. And I feel like no one is really catering to that. And that's what we're trying to be. And at the same time, if users show a lot of interest in one newspaper, I'm happy to transfer over that relationship to
let's talk about
the publisher.
Because I didn't fully realize how much you are a marketer of subscriptions.
Yeah.
I come in, I sample, I pay this for this article, I pay for that article, and then I say, I like this. Are there more like you at home?
Yes.
And I go get married and do a subscription. How do the economics work for you? Do you get a cut of that subscription because you caused it?
Yes.
Do you make more money on the small payments or on the sub sales?
Right now on the small payments, just because we recently started doing the
What's the trend line?
Oh, we launched this last week. This
okay.
is very, very recently.
Oh, okay.
But right now, it's definitely more the separate articles. But what I hope is that we get to, I see ourselves as a lab for journalism. Mm-hmm. I hope that we can try all kinds of different models, different bundles, maybe we do a bundle around topics. Maybe we do a bundle around a specific set of articles from all the publications. Maybe we do bundles around specific journalists. And I want to do this together with the journalists and the publishers to figure out what we are okay with. As a people, how are we okay with paying for journalism? We don't know yet.
Right.
And we started with the separate articles. Yep. And on this I want to build to figure out where the sweet spot is. And I think if there's any company right now that's able to experiment with this kind of stuff, with the leverage from the publishers and with the reads that we build up now, I think it's us, which makes me really happy.
Well, the other thing I wonder about with you is I believe that when people, I pay for the New York Times, I pay for it gladly. My motive to pay for it is not access to content.
Yeah.
My motive paying for that is patronage.
Yeah.
I want to be a patron of the New York Times because it matters. And there are a few publications that deserve that, and there are many others that do not. There are different motives people have to pay for publications. Crowdfunding enables people to, so one is I pay to be a member of, let's say, The Guardian. Another one is that I want to help a journalist get that done. And you also have an amazing model in this part of the world in De Correspondent, where I believe the motive there is as much as anything to have a relationship with the journalist and support the journalist's work than it is paying for access to content.
Yeah.
So I think Blendle could be tying into different models of consumer revenue. What do you see in terms of the motives consumers have and how you're going to exploit that?
It's one of the things, I love The Correspondent in the sense that I think you're totally right. People not only want full access, they want to kind of support those guys doing that kind of journalism. And you see that actually in the way they do subscriptions. When you subscribe, you can donate too in the same line. And I believe that in the beginning, about half of the people paid extra than the subscription, which is a great sign. So I love that model, and I think it kind of taps in this very common thing that a newspaper used to be. It used to be a community. It used to be something that if you saw someone on the street walking with a Vrij Nederland, which is a Dutch kind of left-wing leaning magazine under his arm, you know he was probably also voting in a specific matter and going to certain bars and drinking obscene amounts of alcohol. And this is true. This is true. But this is kind of lost because it became more generic. Not specifically this particular magazine, but journalism became more generic and less community-like. And when you think of what The Correspondent does very well, is that they enable you to comment on these articles, and you can only respond if you're a member, if you do that with full name, and if you state your occupation. And you can kind of tell over a while that some comments are actually better than the article before, because they really tap into the community, and the community knows that the authors respond, and this becomes a thing. And in the United States, you have The Information, the tech blog, who does this very well, where you have the headline and it says the author, ... and then it says with comments by ...
Yeah.
They put the comments on the same level as so this used to be a newspaper. And
the other insight, I think, from the correspondent is that it recognizes that your content is your best ad.
Yeah.
If I don't subscribe and you do, and you can send me a whole article, where Murdoch and Springer and company passed laws in Germany trying to forbid 3-line snippets, the truth is the best link, as I think you're discovering too, is the whole article.
Yeah. I think that's the reason why they do it is just because they hate Google.
Yes, that's true.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's
a whole nother panel.
That's another thing.
I have tons of questions, but I also want to come out, and I'll come out to you. So if you have questions, can I have a microphone, folks? A mic? And I'll run out and run around.
You're freestyling, aren't you?
Well, I need more steps on my thing.
Good.
Questions, arguments, either of us? Yes. Thank you for sitting in front.
Hi, I'm Andrew, regular journalist. When the printed press dies, and I mean, I think we all agree it does at the end, what happens to Blendle then?
When the printing press, like print newspapers, dies. Yeah, I'm completely medium agnostic. I mean, I don't particularly want to save print journalism. I want to save quality journalism. And in what form or shape, I don't really care.
Will it have an effect on the business, though? If
I think this stuff moves.
What happens to Blendle then is what I think he's asking.
Like we're in the same. We're
in the same boat.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. I mean, if you're a digital-only publication and you're doing a little bit more long form, a little bit more quality journalism, I guess you still want to be able to make money off of that other than just ads. And I want to be able to help you, make your living with that.
I'm all the way back here.
Yes, hello.
Do you think it's able to make newspapers just like movies and music made it possible to have it in a subscription like Spotify and Netflix to have all access?
All access to journalism?
Yeah.
What would you pay for it?
Maybe the same amount as Netflix and Spotify.
Right, and the problem is that's $10, and the problem is that a regular newspaper is about 15 euros. One regular newspaper, so full access to one newspaper. So this is what makes the economics really hard for a lot of publishers to not go all into an all-you-can-read model, because the best ones, they don't really want to participate in a system like that because they're afraid they're going to lose subscribers. This is the hard thing, and this is where I am right now. I want to do that very, very much, and I'm trying very hard to get that to you.
Where was it?
But this needs to be in different steps. I'm sure we'll get there at some point, but we're starting here and taking slow steps until everyone is comfortable with that.
Is journalism, I'm over here now, is journalism overpriced?
I think it's too expensive.
So that's an issue, yeah. All right,
Yes.
Next question.
But on the other hand, I mean, when you go to a supermarket, you don't also expect to get all you can eat for the supermarket. So there are some models where you need to find a mix that actually makes it worthwhile for everyone.
So following the other question, Netflix is creating its own content using also the information gathered from the platform to create like House of Cards, Optimum series. Can you envision Blendle doing the same at one point?
I mean, I think it's really exciting to be able. What Netflix does very well is figuring out what kind of people will probably pay for Netflix. If we are at some point able to figure out what are typical Blendle users and how big are specific audiences for specific kind of content, it might be super niche, or maybe we figure out that a lot of people like stories about, I don't know, a particular politician or whatever, because every time a new story comes out, they open that anyway. Maybe we can prove that certain journalism is worth doing while it's not being done right now. So I don't know if we should do it ourselves, but I can imagine us being helpful in figuring out for journalists what they write about. One of the things we do is we let users ask for their money back if they didn't like a story. So you can instantly...
How often does that happen?
about 10% of the cases.
Ooh,
yeah, so it's. I mean, I'd say it's actually little because the Dutch are an incredibly greedy people, and still it's just 10%. So yes, I can say that stuff. But that also means if you do something that's not worthwhile, if the quality is not good enough or whatever, people are going to ask for their money back anyway. So you have a balance in there in making sure that people pay for the right stuff, and we kind of start to understand what people are willing to pay for.
All right, I got the call for one question, but I appealed and they got two, so we're going to be quick. One here and one way over there.
Hi, thanks Jeff and Alexander for the nice conversation you're having. You were talking about the influence on from social media on publishing. That you say, yeah, Blendle won't change the how do you say, the monetary scheme itself, how publishing is organized and how journalists are paid. Facebook is experimenting now with this tip jar that you can tip content creators. What do you think about that? Is it something relevant for journalism, or how do you see that going?
I mean, I think it's great. I think that the only way that we can get to a place where quality journalism is something that we are okay paying for, just like we are with apps or just like we are with music, I think it's in the experiment around user interface. It's a product question, basically. It's not a question about models or whatever. I inherently believe that Spotify works because it's a great product, and we need to figure out exactly the same thing. And maybe it's tips. Maybe then I should change around my model if you figure out like that. I'm totally fine.
I would also argue, I think there's a lot to explore in the motives of people, why they support journalism. Membership, social status, support for a project, all
being
kind
able
of
to
support
finish
for
something,
journalists.
like a print newspaper, you'd be able to finish it. You'd be proud to be a member of a community. There's all these things that used to be true of newspapers in the old times. We need to implement that on the web in order to make this work.
Our last question.
Hi. With instant articles and with Blendle, it's all about the distribution, right? That's like the main game. In your opinion, why didn't publishers get into this game?
Because I think it's very logical. Publishers are working to make their own product, and they don't want to particularly work on a product that their competitors are in. They want to do their own thing. So, and this was true for music too, right? When Steve Jobs came to the record labels, what the record labels started doing was create their own iTuneses. Everyone all of a sudden had their own iTuneses in which you can only find Warner songs or Sony songs or stuff like that. That didn't work because they needed the technology company to bring them all together. And I think this is fine. I think that it's fine that technology companies can take this role and do where they're good at. But I'm not writing the articles. I know that's a very hard job, and building a newspaper brand or a magazine brand is a big deal. So I'm not touching that. And at the same time, if we can make sure that the wonderful journalism that's being done every day in this country and all around the world, which is really true, every day, if you find the Wall Street Journal in an airport and read the thing from front to back, you understand more about the world than you read on many different websites that you read for a whole month. It's really fucking good what they're making. And I want a lot of people to get those articles, but we need to help you finding the right, take all the friction out, and I'm very sure that the way you now pay for Spotify, you will also do for journalism in 1 year or 2 years. Give us a little bit more time, and then we'll get there.
And it's a perfect question to end in this setting, because the innovation is not coming from the legacy. It needs to come from startups exactly like Alexander and Blendle. And we don't know what's going to work yet, but God bless you for trying. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.